good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our weekly live recording of the Transformation Ground Control podcast. This is a podcast we release each week that covers all things related to digital transformation, including the people, process, and technology sides of change. So thank you for being here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And today's topic that we're going to cover is an overview of the ERP software industry. And I have a great guest for you on to help unpack that topic here today. I'm going to introduce her in just a moment. But before I introduce her, a couple logistical things. First of all, as I mentioned, this is a weekly live stream. We host every Tuesday at the same time, same place, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We actually take this live interview, we edit it, we add some more content to it, and we make it into a full podcast episode of Transformation Ground Control. So this episode that features this interview that you are part of here today will be released a week from tomorrow. And you can also find that podcast on audio podcast platforms such as Google Podcast, Amazon Podcast, Apple Podcast, etc. So wherever you listen to podcasts or watch podcasts, you can find it there. You can also find it streaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter every Wednesday. So it's kind of cool. You all get to be here as part of the live production of the podcast. Secondly, we are going to take audience questions as we always do. And in fact, that is the best part of this live stream. If you were to ask me what the best part is, it's the audience engagement and participation in questions. And that's why we do these podcast interviews live, is to get the audience involved. So any questions you have along the way, please drop them in the chat. I am watching all the streams that we're streaming to today. I can see them all right now in front of me. So drop in the chat any questions you have along the way. And speaking of the chat, if you don't mind, just drop in the chat right now what city and country you're joining from. It's always good to see where the global audience is joining from today. And our guest here today works at a software company that has customers all over the world. So it'd be great to see where in the world you are all from. So just drop in the chat what city and country you're from, and love to hear from you there. So again, today's topic, overview of the ERP software industry. We're going to do sort of a flyover view of what some of the leading vendors are, how they compare to one another, some emerging trends in the ERP software space, and anything you guys want to talk about. So any questions you might have about the space, we're here to take your questions. And joining me for this conversation is Kristin Valentyn, who's a vice president at Epicor Software. So Kristin, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Eric. Thanks. I look forward to this.
Yeah, this will be fun. And you and I have known each other for several years now, and even predating your current role. You've worked at a lot of different software companies. We're going to get to that in just a moment as far as sort of your background. But maybe just to start, tell us a little bit about what you do at Epicor, and also tell us a little bit about what brought you to Epicor. What did you do before you were at Epicor?
Well, as you know, what I did before is probably the most unique and list, and actually would probably be shorter to talk about what I didn't do before Epicor, but we can get to that in just a minute. But I head up the Strategic Alliance and Influencer program here at Epicor. It's part of our overall transformation. Pretty exciting to be part of all of this, especially at this point in my career. And so I report directly to President Lisa Pope, as you know, who has been on other ground controls. And I'm thrilled to be here today talking to everybody who's part of the third stage community.
Absolutely. And glad to have you here. And you have a pretty unique background. And part of the reason why I thought you'd be great to have on the show, and not only have you and I just known each other in your various roles over the years at different companies, but you just have sort of a unique background of having worked for several different software companies. Can you give us a sort of a flavor of, I know you said it might be easier to talk about the ones you haven't worked for, maybe hit some of the highlights of the ones you have worked for to help us understand.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for pointing that out, because I really do think it makes this kind of role very, very kind of cumulative, if you will. But yes, Epicor is my 7th ERP vendor. And I wish I had money on that to challenge one other person, have they ever worked for 7, but they include the ones that we all know about, SAP, Oracle, Infor, but also QAD and SysPro. And then there was an older version, that is an older application that's now owned by Infor, Bond. For those of you who go a few years back, just a few. Yeah.
Right.
But
and Bond is still around. We still deal with companies that are still using Bond. Most of them are trying to move away from it, but a lot of them are still using it.
yeah.
So pretty unique background in terms of these different vendors you've worked for. You've worked with the big guys, the smaller guys, the guys in between, and pretty unique perspective. What do you when you look at these different. Well, actually, before I ask that question, sorry, let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
How did you get in? I'm just curious more than anything. How did you end up in the space? Like if we go back before you were working for any of these vendors, how did you end up in the ERP software space? I always love to ask that question because I myself just sort of stumbled into it. So I'm curious how you got into it.
Well, I like you, stumbled into it as well. And I want to say, actually, for any of those who are listening, who might be on the up and coming of their opportunity of their careers, you know what? Opportunity presents itself in some strange looking, clothes, situations, even opportunities. And so, I heard Ashton Kutcher say opportunity often looks a lot like hard work. And so as much as, you don't wake up one day and you're here, it's a question of being open-minded, talking to people, figuring out, and really fundamentally think, beginning and ending every day, that somebody's got value, and our job is to listen to that. So I was very, very fortunate in my career. I met somebody who introduced me to a CFO, and I think everybody was being nice. But when they made the mistake of saying, please call back, please touch base with us every 2 weeks, they didn't realize I did for 9 months.
Right. Until
And
they,
so when an opportunity came up, that's how I got into technology. And, for women who are on the line too, it's really important to note that at that time, there were people who were very well intended and had my best interests at heart, but were very gentle in saying, software is hard, Kristin. It's hard. And what I want everyone to encourage is no, it's not. If
right.
if you have a fundamental interest in business and you are smart enough to follow the money, and what I mean by that is money is driving. I mean, this is a business, not a hobby, not a charity. It's a business, and if you follow the money and look at the orientations of money, you can grasp almost any concept in business, most notably in technology, because we're all writing software so companies compete more effectively, have much more customer loyalty, are profitable. I mean, think about all of those pieces tie right back down to the money.
Right.
So never, if you think you can do it, keep an open mind, listen, and you're probably a lot smarter than your peers. Never give your peers more credit than they deserve.
Yes. Great line and great set of advice there. Just real quickly before I get to my other questions here, I want to turn to the audience and just look at where people are joining from today. As I mentioned, there's typically people all over the world that join these discussions, and today is no different. We have people from Denver, Colorado, London, Singapore, Nashville, Tennessee, Dubai, Southwest Missouri, U.S., Western Colorado, Denver, Birmingham, UK, Ecuador, LA, Italy, India, Canada, Egypt, Vietnam, UK again, a few people from UK. So thank you all for joining from all over the world, especially for those of you joining at odd times of day and night. Appreciate you joining here today. And any questions you have about the ERP software industry, different software vendors, how they compare, how you might evaluate potential vendors, anything like that you have questions about, please feel free to drop it in the chat here. And in fact, before I get into my questions too, one thing I want to point out. First of all, I'll caveat this by saying Third Stage is independent. We are not affiliated with Epicor, and we're also not affiliated with any software vendors. But we do every year put out a top 10 ranking of the top 10 ERP systems. And we just released, actually today is the first day it's available. And we wanted to make sure we had it in time for this discussion. But every year we do the top 10 ranking of the top 10 ERP systems. I'm going to put a QR code up on the screen here in front of you up the top left. If you scan that QR code, you can download the top 10 ERP systems for 2024. And you can also pre-register to receive our 2024 Digital Enterprise Operations Report, which is sort of an overview of the industry, comparison of different software vendors, et cetera. So be sure to download that. And the reason I'm bringing that up as part of this conversation is Epicor is in our top 10 list for the first time. They're at number 5 this year in our top 10 ranking. So
Woo-hoo.
when you download that, you will see that Epicor is number 5, and you can read and see how it compares to other systems. And that's really the gist of today's conversation too, is really taking your unique perspective, Kristin, and trying to understand what Epicor is doing in the market, and as well as how it compares to other technologies that are out there, since you've worked for a lot of them. But when you look at these 7 different software vendors you've worked at and worked with over the years, what are some of the biggest differences you see among these different products? I mean, in some ways, I've heard people say in the industry, like, oh, all ERP software is pretty much the same. They just have a different, front end, GUI or whatever, but they all kind of do the same thing, which I don't think you believe that's true. I don't believe that's true. But how would you summarize just some of the big differences between different systems in the marketplace in general?
Well, so ERP is commoditizing. Let's just call a spade a spade. And so, to a certain extent, there's a kind of a checklist of do you do these functions? Absolutely. But I think it's really important to look at the company itself of the software author, where they're headquartered, because all of that flows into what that software is. So at the end of the day, having been with so many, I've picked up all these beautiful nuggets along the lines, as well as best practices. And if you always keep in mind that software is business process expressed in technology,
Hmm.
right? It is how people think in technology. So if you look at how an SAP goes to market and how they see themselves, and also how the software is written, all of that about their culture, their expectations flows right into the software, as well as, so you can look at the culture of where the company's headquartered, but also too, did they start with financials first or vertical first? Those are two things that are very, very defining. And it's not to say that people can't be tremendously successful, but understanding those inherent differences. I've worked
Hmm.
for, or worked closely with companies that were based in Israel, South Africa, obviously with CISPRO, right? The way they go to market, we all think, hey, software, software, software. Nope, entirely different. Australia, and then, with Bond too. Bond was very, very, I was part of the aerospace and defense practice, which was very internationally driven.
Hmm.
So, those kinds of things really do ferret out in making sure that either if you're looking to bet your business on, ERP, or you're looking to bet your career on ERP, those are important criteria to take into account so that you can quickly understand what the intended value is and where you're going to gain from it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and certainly, I like your phrase that ERP is what'd you say, their business processes enabled by technology. Is that
Expressed in technology. Yep.
got it? I love that. It's a great saying. So, when you look at the software, the ERP software space in general over the years that you and I have both been in this space,
Yeah.
what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in the industry in general? How has ERP software evolved? What are the biggest changes that you've seen or that you're most excited about in recent years?
I actually candidly, finally, ERP is offering the promise of ERP. Um, for some of you, I hope you have a beach with a drink with an umbrella in your sights. But for some of you, you've been entering data into these systems for 40, sometimes 50 years, and then have these excruciating jobs of getting it out into anything meaningful. And now, and even my ERP brethrens are going to be like, wait, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable about that. But now ERP and its focus is shifting to being, if you look at the outcome is the car, and it's all about data. It's the car is going to take you where you want to go, and data becomes that car. It is data so that you can be predictive, prescriptive, proactive. The data thing is so exciting. And now the tools are such that all of this stuff you've been putting into your ERP can actually be harnessed. And all of that now fuels that data car, so to speak, to get you where you want to go. We've all seen incredibly manual, tedious processes. And so much of that is going to go away so that we can really feel like we have a meaningful impact, or we can compete more effectively, or we can just get to market faster. Oh, and surprise, smarter.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And especially now when you look at some of the tools that a lot of the software vendors have, like artificial intelligence and analytical tools. I mean, they've always had reporting, so your basic reporting, but now you've got um, AI and machine learning and analytics and things like that that can actually make use of all this data that we've all been hoarding as organizations for decades. And so I think that's one of the benefits of ERP software now.
Oh, it's tremendous. And, back to that point about, kind of how that data is structured. And again, ERP is business process expression technology. I often say, what's simpler in your home than socks? There
Hmm.
are 4 people in my home, and there are 4 different or sock drawer organizations. And if you think about it, because that is literally how people think based on their needs, their requirements, their preferences. And if you think about software is architected that way, so that it's how somebody's thought process goes. Or how often have you gone into somebody's kitchen and like, where the hell do you keep the glasses? Well, that's again, I can't find a coffee cup.
Right.
Um, but my point being is it's how people think that's expressed in technology, and data then takes that. So all that information is organized relative to your company, how you think, how your software vendor thinks or your software author thinks. But now data then takes that and says, okay, what do you want to do with it?
Right.
And really takes it to that next level. And it becomes actually more about being customer centric, because you can communicate with your customer better. You're Even when I say customer centricity, I actually expand the concept over and above competing for customers, but competing for talent.
Right.
Making it easier to use makes people feel more comfortable, more effective, and also see a bigger career trajectory when they really feel like data allows you to be much more meaningful faster, as opposed to the nah, 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 nah.
Right.
I'm going to go sit at my desk with my stack of papers and
Right. You go enter it into a spreadsheet and manipulate it, and then I'll have hopefully the right answer of what I'm looking for.
in about 6 or 8 weeks.
Right. Right.
When the market's already passed.
Right. The data is obsolete at that point, but at least I got the report done.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Well, this is a good segue, this question here, a good segue from something you just said, Kristen. And this is from Kyler on LinkedIn. It says, Kristen, interested to hear your perspective on the shift from the fit our requirements or leave approach, and that's in quotes, to quote unquote customer centric focus in the ERP vendor marketing place. What are your thoughts? And you started to talk about a little bit about customer centricity. And I know that's a big strategic focus for Epicor at the moment, but what can you say about that?
Well, I originally got tasked, by Lisa Pope to say, make sense out of digital transformation. Talk about like an incredibly overused term, and can be very, very innocuous. And as you know, and we've all learned from the ground control podcast, it really kind of falls under operational efficiencies, getting to the cloud, data centric, but customer centricity. And I talk about that specifically because Epicor's got a commitment to be very composable software, right?
Mm.
So that you can create what works, the best business blueprint for your success. But also, I was just talking to Vaibhav, Vora, our chief technology product officer, and he said, and make software people want to use. What a concept.
Right.
One of the companies that I did work for, and then on the other side of it, used, it took me 6 hours to enter in a single purchase order.
Mm.
6 hours.
For one single PO?
One single PO. It
Wow.
was, yeah. And the good news is all the post office were safe. I didn't take out a
Right.
yeah, I didn't end up on the news after I got it done.
Right.
But you think about software that people want to use and can use. This company had very large deals and didn't, so that you weren't entering in a purchase order all the time, nor did they have huge staff to be able to have this whole staff ready and waiting to enter in PO. But think about that. Think about what that means from the whole value chain, right? That customer, is their order right when the specific is so rigid and so finite? Can you be that fluid and dynamic to your customers? Oh, by the way, can you just interact with them in a meaningful way so that they're They're getting timely updates. And so one, you can take their response, but also two, back to the workforce and the if you will, it's kind of corny, the vibe you bring to the market, right? Or you a can-do collaborative partner with your customers when, as I mentioned, you're ready to throw your laptop across the window,
Right.
the room.
Right. Well, and this is an interesting comment from Gary on YouTube. Gary says, "Don't let bad processes drive the technology, though." And that's sort of what you're saying is, don't take a bad process, an inefficient process, and then hope that your new technology can just automate that. Really
Oh,
want to rethink how you approach your business.
right. Or Gary, let me just say, don't put lipstick on a pig.
Right.
So yeah, you really do need to think about those processes and do they work? But also too, that makes the point about this was a $60 million company, should not have had, I won't say which one of the ones, but the first couple that I always call out shouldn't have had it, just too heavy a product for a $60 million company. Now that company wanted to go public. So of course they purchased, the software so that they could, kind of create their profile for, there to go get a much more effective, offering. But, that was a little too ahead of the curve and the software was just too big and too heavy and they didn't have the infrastructure. But, we also know too, and I think Gary makes a great point. We've all heard the story. I think, Eric, if I tortured you with this, please let me know. But, about the new bride who makes her husband the celebratory meal of a roast and she immediately lops the end off. Right? You've heard this story?
I have not, or if I have, I don't remember where we're going with it. So I'm curious
Well,
to see.
it makes Gary's point in that the new, immediately the husband is quite distressed because the end is his favorite part. And I'll make this a lot. It's certainly I can milk a joke, but this one for you guys, I'll try to make it quick. The long and the short of it is he, great meal, goes to the mother-in-law and says, I love your daughter. Great. It was so touched by this celebratory meal, but why does she lop the end off of the roast before she makes it? Oh, you don't understand. It came from my mother. It's handed down traditions. We always used it for, holidays and big events, and it's a time honored tradition. Goes to the grandmother and says, well, thank you very much. I love your daughter. It was great. But then goes to the grandmother and says, great meal, loved it, etc. But I don't understand why you cut the end of the roast off when that's my favorite part. And the grandmother says, because my pants are too small.
It's very fitting. I mean, well, pardon that was not an intentional pun, but it's
Oh
fitting
yeah,
for
nice pun. Yeah.
but for this industry, that's very fitting. Yeah, it needs to. You don't want to force fit. Is that the lesson here? You don't want to force fit a process into technology and vice versa.
Well, and also question, why are we doing these things this way? Just because you've always done them this way does not necessarily mean you should be doing them going forward. And it's not to say that, you're contrarian, but I think it's really healthy to question and say, does this matter? Is this, is it relevant? And also, question your market. If you have relationships with your customers to say, how does this fit? Is this working for you? But at the same time, also, and many of us probably don't want to hear it, but also ask your up and coming workforce. How did this feel? Does this make sense? I had the wonderful opportunity of calling on a contract manufacturer in Reno, which we know is a huge growth area.
Hmm.
And the guy who did the scheduling came in at 4 a.m., posted the schedule. So when they came in at 7, all the workers gathered around the pole that it was taped on. This is true. At 7, 9, after lunch, and again at 2, based on the deliveries that came in that day.
Hmm.
And you're thinking to yourself, just think about the time that's taking. Yes, the scheduling guy was brilliant. Yes, that is how the way they did it. But yes, also too, what should have taken, 2 to 5 minutes of where are my jobs and what can I work on was turning into 2.5 hours of coffee clatching because everybody was gathering around. And you look at like, okay, yep, the schedule's good and everybody knows what they need to do. But are we getting the kind of productivity that allows us to take more jobs or to deliver jobs faster? because we just keep, well, that's how we always did it. And candidly, in that situation, the workers liked the poll. They
Yeah.
liked gathering around and chatting. So there was also that change that has, which is just this kind of question. I mean, that's an obvious, this doesn't seem terribly efficient, but you can also see where there's going to be resistance to change. So when you do challenge, why we are doing this all the way, also embrace that, most people don't wake up and saying, I need to be different today. And so, you really need to assess the change, the aptitude for change, the digestibility for change, or consumption, I should say.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because as you were telling that story, the first thing I thought about was the scheduling guy, and the scheduling guy is probably going to be the first one to resist that change because it's a heroic sort of a job, right? He's despite all these limitations of data and systems and processes and manual stuff, he or she is now still making it happen, and so that those heroics go away if you start to automate that person's process. So you have to think about it from a change perspective too, and not assume necessarily that the scheduling guy is going to love it because it's going to make his job easier. He's not going to love it because now he's going to question his value to the organization, and so it might be best for the organization, but that's sort of the change management nuance that a lot of organizations overlook.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely critical. And whether that's a scheduling guy or a reporting guy or somebody, or, who's heading up your shop floor, even facilities, there is always going to be a certain resistance to change. And so it's important to frame that questioning in a respect-based way, that actually focuses on the outcome, not necessarily the people doing it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. I want to hit a couple comments here on various platforms here. There was one I had here that I wanted to pull up. Where is it? Bear with me. I just lost it. This isn't the one I was looking for, but this is just a thoughtful comment that I want to include here and thank the person. This is Sneehit on YouTube. Says, I am Sneehit, an MBA student from India. Your weekly sessions are incredibly informative and enlightening. So thank you for that. I love hearing that sort of feedback. So I'm glad you listen often and find this info helpful. And I hope you continue to do so. Kyler, just to close a loop on this, Kyler does come back to the sock analogy, and she feels like socks are a complex issue in her household. So you really hit a nerve there with the sock analogy there. But
wait, Kyler, until you've got, pro, kids on sports teams, then the whole sock thing really expands. Yeah.
How old are your kids, Kristin?
Mine are 22. I have twins. But
okay.
Yeah, but especially on varsity teams, then you've got, certain colors. I did not know there's a whole fashion choice in your tube socks.
Yes.
I don't even call them tube socks anymore. But
there's probably a cooler name than that you and I are not privy to. But I've got two teenage boys that are in sports. I feel really bad for my wife who has to deal with the sock situation in our household. So I do not typically deal with that. Now here's a question that I want to come to because it's about a specific vendor, but I think we could generalize this question a little bit too. This is from a handle named Vapor Trails on YouTube. And this user says, I know that for us, Microsoft Dynamics has all the tools we need, but it has a steep learning curve and the cost to get someone to help us with it is too high for our budget. So I guess just to maybe frame that into a question about ERP systems in general and the things you should think about as you evaluate potential vendors, how important is that user interface and that user experience? I know you've talked a bit about customer experience. What about the user experience and how you guys addressing that, or how do you think about that at Epicor?
Well, Vapor Trails, I want to thank you very, very much for that question because, I know I'm probably banging this drum just a little too loud, but again, back to customer centricity, because ERP has become kind of commoditized, if you will, the shift of quote unquote power is moving to you. As the customer to say, I want and what I need. And to Eric's point, that is about the UI, that is about whether the footprint is light, and, their fast time to benefit, and are the solutions composable. And so when you talk about, those are obviously, I just articulated some of our key themes for the year. And what we mean by, again, I'll mention again, but composable means that you're empowered to create the best business blueprint for your success. And again, that you need to, no different than taking a look at the software publishers, kind of profile. Look at your own profile too. Do we have the staff? What is the age of our workforce? And so, in terms of, consuming new technologies, that's where you're going to get things like the UI. As crazy as it sounds, we all still heard of the green screen people, but trust me, their data entry is off the charts fast. Whoever thinks of this, right? But in the other point, there's a whole other community. If they're not tapping, swiping, and pinching, they literally are struggling to use technology. So that's your point about the UI, is take a good hard look at your company relative to, how consumable, how usable. Do people want to use that software? Because in the industry, people equate application efficacy with the UI experience. And so it is window dressing. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, but but at the end of the day, if they're not going to use it because they don't like it, then you're still not getting the value out of your software. And you can kind of move through the value chain relative to all of those pieces in terms of composable, because, again, when technology providers were kind of more in control, and that really is, I think, the most fundamental change. And I hate to talk about the new normal, but let's call a spade a spade. Where we are today is never going to go back to where we were 3 years ago. It's just not. Technology and options and a service oriented culture have changed literally our days, the way we literally live our lives, and that's never going to go backwards. And so when you think about that relative to, again, the power of choice is shifted over to you all customers. Where do you want to invest? Do you want to continue to invest in software? That's one of the things that we think about. I love being at Epicor because Epicor has a fast time to benefit commitment. It's not the traditional 1 to 4 of licenses to software. And, again, going back to that one vendor that I actually worked for and used, the mantra was, yippee, we've got a new customer. I've got a 10-year services trajectory. Wait, what? Okay, so I have this whole ecosystem that's looking forward to living off of me, and I can't use that same funds to invest in my new product or buy my competitor to grow my market space, or actually get better, or expand my product line, or hire more salespeople so I can just sell more. So, that's what I keep talking about. This shift over to you is to, okay, what are your priorities as a company? And what which one of us is going to be your partner saying, you know what, you've got this. We're here to support you in those choices and giving you options, and whether it's budget or, utilization of existing investments, like, the ability to integrate to anything, that's really where you want to look at, is who's going to be my partner in creating that best business blueprint for your success, because you know your market, you know what it requires, you know what you need to do, and there's uniquenesses to you that need to be retained, because that is your customer value proposition, that's your profit margin, that's your difference in when you go to market.
Right.
One of the best practices that I got from, which I thought was just brilliant, but I've learned little great nuggets throughout all of them. But QED used to say a $2 billion manufacturer has food manufacturer has the exact same needs as a $2 million manufacturer. And because those $2 million food manufacturers are now fast and coming and want to be purchased or whatnot, everybody's got to compete. And who's going to be your partner in competing?
Right. Right.
Does that answer your question?
It answers it for me, but it wasn't my question. So we'll have to I
Maybe
forgot.
did we answer your question?
Yeah, let us know if we did not answer your question, or if we have a follow-up to that. But I thought that's a great response, in my opinion. I have a question that's actually going to lead into a couple other questions from the audience, but I'll ask maybe a more broad question. But first, before I do that, in addition to our top 10 ERP systems, that is right. My camera's backwards, so I have to figure out which way I'm pointing here. But right here, there's a QR code on the screen. If you scan that, you can get our top 10 ERP systems, and you'll see how Epicor ranks to other systems in the market. Spoiler alert, they're number 5 on the list in case you missed the beginning where I said that. The other thing I want to invite you to, I'm really excited about this. This is a shameless self-promotion here, Kristin, so bear with me, although I'm going to give you credit for this too. My new book is called The Final Countdown, and I just got these hard copies yesterday. It still has the watermark on it because it's the advanced copy. It's going to be available on paperback and hard copy starting Saturday on Amazon. But in the meantime, you can buy it now, the Kindle copy on Amazon, which you don't have to have a Kindle device. You can watch it on any device, but you can order the electronic copy on Amazon. And I'm going to put the link up here for you in just a second. But I'm excited about that. It's my first book that's available worldwide. So be sure to check that out.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And the reason I'm going to give you credit is because all I did in this book was summarize what I've learned over 25 years of being in the industry. And I've just learned it from people like you. So all I'm really doing is conveying back to in the book of what I've learned from people like you. So really, we should have Kristin Valentyn as a co-author on this. I wonder if there's time to maybe go back to press and we could add a little Eric Kimberling and Kristin Valentyn and every other person that I've learned a ton of stuff from over the years. So
well, I often say I don't have an original idea. I'm just super smart at parroting back something I've learned from SAP, Oracle, Q80, Infor, Syspro, and Bond. So yes.
Yes, I feel the same way often. So I'll leave that up here for a second. If it goes away and you don't have time to scan it, or if you're having trouble with the QR code, you can also just go to thefinalcountdown.com, and that'll take you directly to the page where you can read about it, read more about the book itself, and also you can order it on there as well. So go to thefinalcountdown.com, or you can just scan the QR code here in front of you. However, I am going to hide it because it is covering Kristin's face, and I don't want to cover Kristin's face throughout this conversation. So
I have the voice for radio. I have the face for radio. Yeah.
That's what I would say about myself. So it's funny. We're thinking alike, although I think I have more of a face for radio, definitely than you do.
But I can't wait to read it. It's really, and that's a question that's so often asked is, what are you reading now? And, obviously, yes, Eric and I have known each other from a different, prior to Epicor, we met, 10 years ago?
Probably, yeah. I think it's about 10 years ago.
At a competing vendor, and that's very, very notable, and you'd all recognize the name. But I really do encourage you to read, to get that glean, because what you're going to realize, again, if we keep going back to ERP is business process express and software, you're going to see that compare and contrast in a really effective way to say what's going to fit for my company, in terms of, again, adoption, expectation, cycles, amount of investment. Let's face it, we all don't need a Lamborghini to go to the grocery store, right? And but in the same respect, based on your brand, we sure as hell don't necessarily want to be maybe in a Ford Focus if we have to drop our kids off at school. So there's these, so it's, both are great, both are cars, both will get you where you want to go, but which is the right one for you? And that's kind of where.
Right, absolutely. And actually that's a perfect segue into the question I was going to ask you next. That's also sort of a gateway question into a bunch of audience questions that are piling on here. But one of the questions that I had for you, Kristin, is how do you, if we shift gears here and talk more specifically about Epicor and where Epicor fits in the market, how it compares to other software vendors, how do you see Epicor fitting in the ERP software landscape overall?
That's actually one of the reasons I'm here. First and foremost, I love the fact that our executive leadership team is literally best in class. If you look at the backgrounds, it's really some inspiring, exciting experiences and companies that they're bringing to the leadership team, the vision, the direction of Epicor. But the other thing that's really different, and especially for those of you who are up and coming in your careers, I worked with a coworker who used to refer to, and because I've spent a lot of time in billion-dollar companies, and they would talk about the UPAMs. I always love that expression. The unknown people above me. right? Where, the CEO is a picture you see on, either a magazine or in the financial report, but who the God, who the heck do we even know who these people are? Right. And not only so, in contrast to those, you're even nervous a little bit if you happen to be in the elevator with them, like zoinks, those are the kinds of things where Epicor's executive leadership team is the most accessible, but accessible in such a great way. We actually are running this $1 billion best business practice series where we just have our executives talk about kind of what keeps them up at night. And when I say what keeps them up at night, right? What really excites them about their jobs? Where do they see they're going to make an impact? Where do they want to take their role? And that's across the company. And so not only so you've got best in class experience, but you also have this very accessible, we all put our shoes on the exact same way attitude of ask the question. And Eric, you've probably actually seen some of that. In terms of your interactions with them, there's really not a lot of pomp and circumstance. There's a very accessible, how can I help attitude and where can I help? So one, you hear about this consistently, but people come to companies, but they leave for bosses. And so I think first and foremost, it is the executive leadership team, but that threads all the way through to the vision. Again, going back to you as the customer, it's awesome to be in a product, be with a company that understands that, fast time to benefit is what you need. Sure. Love to take your money for the next 5 to 10 years in terms of implementing this really big software. But you know what? I liked the thought of that we've worked together and you're more competitive for it. And
Right.
that you were able to get benefits in year one. So the light footprint, fast time to benefit, those kinds of things are just simply fun. Epicor is very committed to integrate to anything and everything, which again allows you to reuse your existing investments because we all have a pet application that we just love or politically cannot get rid of, or just is best in class and want to tie to. So, light footprint plus integration plus the commitment on, again, as Vaibhav said just the other day, we want to build software that people want to use. What a concept.
Yeah.
So it just, but again, Vaibhav, we're thrilled to have him here. He and I share one of those competitors. So we work there, but he also, the robotics that Walmart uses, he designed. So you really have some really exciting innovation and really kind of cutting edge, like the usability is paramount to him. And so,
Right.
and he's leading all of our products. So that's pretty exciting. But it's also great to be able to pick up the phone and he takes your call.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great overview, and I think that couple things you touched on. I mean, the focus on you've talked a lot about customer centricity, which also sort of includes the user experience and the user ease of use is critical. And then also, the way I've described Epicor's leadership team now is sort of an all-star team. I mean, I do think that you guys have done a really good job of getting a lot of industry players that have been around for a while and have worked at other vendors, and you sort of assembled this team that's really added a lot of stability to the company. I mean, one concern I've had, and I've shared this with you, Kristin, is that 10 years ago, I mean, Epicor was kind of a mess as a company. I mean, they were changing hands quite a bit with PE firms buying and selling them. They had gutted their ecosystem and the VAR network and created sort of an adversarial relationship with a lot of them. And what ended up happening is I think the product suffered, the ecosystem suffered, the customers, of course, suffered and all that. But I think what you guys have done in the last few years is sort of refocus and restabilize the company and now get back to the growth mode because it is a good product and it always has been a good product. I mean, Epicor is a product that I was using, or we were seeing clients use way before even you joined and others that are on the team now. So I think that direction you guys are going seems to be very positive from sort of an objective perspective on our side of things.
Well, thank you. And for anybody listening, and that's why it was so freaking hard to get back on that top 10 list.
Right.
Because what Eric is talking about was, yes, you can have great software, but are you a partner?
Right.
And what's that vision and what's that go forward strategy? And so again, yep, I can take that Lamborghini to the car, to the grocery store, but what is that, is it, think about the maintenance of keeping a Lamborghini to drive your 2 or 3 miles to the grocery store and you don't have truck space. It's a lot of lift, heavy lifting, when in fact you just want something easy peasy and gets the job done. And I don't want to diminish it because of the depth that Epicor has. It's really nice to be able to look people in the eye, and we get great feedback that people really enjoy working with Epicor. Plus, they really feel like the software makes a difference. But it's just kind of that shifting of that focus. And I want to take a moment. I've had the pleasure of working with Lisa at Oracle, QAD, Infor, and now Epicor. So I think she's close to me in number of ERP vendors, or closest I've come. But her vision and her leadership really does. And again, taking all of those best practices to the benefit of Epicor. So building on really good software, all the things that Eric just talked about was, the partnership, the ecosystem, the community, the interaction, very, very, those are equally important drivers in today's market.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a, and by the way, again, right, wrong way here. Download the top 10 ERP systems and let us know if you are reading it. If you happen to be multitasking and reading the top 10 ranking while we're chatting here, I'd love to hear feedback. Do we put Epicor in the right spot? Do we miss a vendor? Do we have someone overrated? I'd love to hear the feedback in the
I
comments here.
definitely want to hear about the overrated ones.
Yes. Well, actually,
us. Yeah.
I have, there's someone, I forgot who it was. I think it was the Vapor Trail handle that's sort of chatting about Microsoft Dynamics and some of the concerns there. So they may think that person, I don't want to speak for that person, but they may think Microsoft is overrated in our top 10, but I'd be curious to hear from the audience here. But here's a question that I've never thought of this question, but actually it's a great question that I would love to hear your response to. And I just want to put you on the spot, Kristin. And this is the best question I could find that totally puts you on the spot. But this is from Mohammed on LinkedIn. Mohammed says, why is Epicor not focusing to be competitive in the Middle East like Dynamics, SAP, and Oracle are? So what are your thoughts? Are you guys, truly multinational? Are you stronger in certain regions than others? Or what are your thoughts as it relates to the Middle East and maybe other parts of the world too?
We're definitely stronger in certain parts of the world, and understand from companies like SAP, Oracle, and in Microsoft, they obviously, again, talking about the origin, or Epicor grew up from a US based company and out. Oracle very much that way, but Microsoft always has been a global footprint. So, they, and really the ERP is just kind of this great other thing that they can get. SAP's always been global. And certainly we do have, in fact, Andy Cousins runs our EMEA division. And I know we're working to be much more aggressive and much more competitive, because our kinetic manufacturing is absolutely multilingual and works very, very well there. But we've recently hit the $1 billion mark, which is pretty exciting. And if you get a chance to, Sam Monty can talk about kind of our financial performance and how well we've consistently been doing year over year, to Eric's point, with kind of this new management structure. So we definitely see areas like the Middle East as growth areas, and certainly, we look to do more there.
Right. So,
I'll own it, and Asia Pac.
Right.
Unfortunately, too often, the Middle East falls under other, which isn't fair to the Middle East. Very, very important. But the different languages do, present some obstacles. And so that's, the cost of getting into those markets can be a little bit higher.
Right. But you do have, in fact, I went to the Epicor conference earlier this year, and I met one in particular, VAR, someone who was the president of an Epicor VAR there. I think he was in Dubai, if I remember correctly. So I'm sure there's more than just him, but I met at least one VAR when I was there of a Middle East implementer of Epicor.
Oh, yeah.
Partner of Epicor.
And if you go on Epicor's website, you can find the partners that cover Middle East, based in India, as you mentioned, Saudi Arabia, et cetera. But we have a listing of partners that are in the Middle East.
Right. Okay. Um, there was a question here around. No, I don't even remember what it was. Oh, here it is. This is from Tom on LinkedIn. And this is more of a general, sort of a trendy sort of a question, just the general direction of the ERP software space. And I'd be curious to hear what you see in the market overall and how Epicor in particular is addressing this. But Tom asked the question of, will we see an increased interest for best of breed systems based on the development of composable ERP based on cloud native? And you used the word composable ERP earlier as well, Kristin. And for those that don't know or aren't familiar with the term, best of breed essentially suggests that you have multiple systems that focus really well and are the best fit for different parts of your business. So instead of one single ERP system, you might have multiple systems that address different parts of your business, with the idea being that you find a better fit, creates a little bit more technical complexity, may or may not be the best answer for you, but it could be a good option for you depending on what your needs are. How does Epicor view best of breed, and where do you see best of breed going in general? Is that an emerging trend? Is it a dying trend? How do you see it fitting in?
Well, the more things change, the more things they, stay the same, or vice versa. So there was a huge best of breed trend actually when I was with Oracle. And I'm going to actually cite an interesting nugget that I learned at SAP, which has stayed with me throughout. And that is the best case fit to business scenario is 80% of any software.
Right.
Best fit to business. So there's always going to be about 20% where you're going to have to, relative to your market or your product or even your region. But there's you're going to need buy, build, or partner for that 20%. But here's the key thing, and again, this is an SAP stat. The average fit to business is 60%. Think
Wow.
about that.
Huh.
So 40% is buy, build, partner, which really does move. So in terms of best of breed, but you as the customer, if that's what your role is, the power shifts over to you. So, Eric asked me kind of what things do you see changing? Well, I would say 5 to 8 years ago, we started to see IT becoming strategic. They were putting they were putting their thumbprint on things. They were no longer, I want this, make it happen, IT. They were now being brought into the strategy discussions. And so, because that's a unique, wonderful role where they not only understand what technologies are available, they understand the company in which they need to work with them. And so that's where I do see much more, breast of breed requirements for two things. One, understanding that nobody's going to be 100% for anything. And candidly, if they tell you that, they're liars, period. Right. Just that's why there's 70 ERP options in the United States alone. So one, nobody's 100%. So in looking at that 40, looking at your own company and saying, you know what, I like you for all of this, but I really love this HR, for example. And so yes, that kind of best of breed. And that's point number one. But the other thing too is you guys out there didn't just start business yesterday. You've got this collection of these investments, and some of the stuff may be ugly, but it's working. Some of the stuff, as I mentioned, may be political, so you can't get rid of it. There's a very expensive, large PLM that, has become a sacred cow, although rumor has it takes about 7 years to implement. So you're so in, you can't. So those sacred cows, or look at that offers that niche functionality that is my differentiator in the market. Again, I'll just use the PLM example, but we all know one full size PLM doesn't fit all, because you could be in frozen foods, and that's an entirely different requirement than if you're, we love this example, making bicycles, right? So, what is the right, products for your market, who are made for your market. And so I actually do see now that where we are with all of those things kind of converging, A, IT is strategic, B, you've got investments and you got to continue to get value out of it because of the profit drivers that we're all working towards, and C, that time to benefit. I see, and when I say time to benefit, the whole rip and replace, good God.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's looking for a hobby or has all this free time on their jobs,
Right.
nor is sitting around saying, what to do with this extra cash? No. So, the point where we can all kind of pack that parachute while we're getting ready to jump out is kind of the new normal.
Mhm.
And best of breed allows you to continue to use what you have, continue to be forward, not pull out critical applications that might, like be customer centric while you're cleaning up other things, but continue this kind of evolutionary and then you benefit, and then talk about that person who wants to protect their role, but then IT truly is strategic because they're making an educated decision about that company's drivers, profit requirements, growth requirements, and they really can decide this is the right thing for us. We're no longer going to be told all you can eat, buy everything from us, because not everything is going to fit your market.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point, or a series of great points. What as organizations think about as they plan for ERP implementations, let's just assume there's some people on the discussion here who are trying to figure out, what's the best ERP system for me. And of course, one of the things you could do is download that right there, QR code, top 10 ERP systems. That might give you some ideas and a starting point to look at. But what are some of the things that you would suggest to people that are about to embark on an ERP initiative of some sort? What are those top things that they should be thinking about or aware of as they get started?
The question obviously is, that came up earlier is do not look to software to be lipstick on the pig.
Mm.
First and foremost, take a deep, hard look at how you're doing business and saying, does this work for me? Yes, no. And then, so when you start from your goals, and when I say, when does this work for me? Yes, no. That really means what are our end games? Um, and I don't mean to put too fine a point on it, but I am going to get promoted if we do X, or I am likely to get fired if we don't do. That's where your company's goals and drivers are. So, first and foremost, what's the company marching to? That's the first thing, and then look at, do those processes support that? And so taking that hard look at it, and then I do really encourage you get the guidance from a third stage. One of the things that we love about third stage is they're completely unbiased. Eric was terrific in giving you some very candid feedback. Now we love to hear it. We always want the opportunity to be better. But that's where you're really going to get, based on your growth trajectory, I'd recommend this over that. Or, oh, by the way, I know what they're telling you, but you might really want to look deeper in that because they might not have that micro vertical functionality that's really your secret sauce in your market. So so understand your processes, and someone like third stage can really help you crystallize that. I've done enough business planning that until you get even your executives in the room, a lot of them actually have different objectives, different goals. And so that's an important process that a third stage can bring all that together. And then once you embark on that and you're working together, then look at the culture of the company. Do you
Mm.
want an ERP vendor, or do you want a ERP partner? Because a partner means that issues which going to arise, we just discussed this, right? The 60% fit to business. Also, you guys know things are going to happen. Again, I'll go back to my home analogies, which I use a lot of times. I'd love to meet the person who's had a kitchen remodel done on time and on budget. Well, you know what? Believe it or not, software is not any different and it's equally disruptive. So,
Right.
so issues happen. But if you have a partnership, those issues are just annoyances.
Yeah.
But if you have a vendor, they're problems.
Yeah.
And so we really want to look at the culture and company, the culture of the company in terms of, are they my partner? Do we see us as us, or do we really feel like it's us and them?
Right.
Um, and then you'll get to, does the software meet my needs? But that's kind of how you want to short list is processes, third stage, culture, and then the software. Because you wouldn't get to a short list that didn't meet your needs, working with third stage.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And one of the things too that you touched on is that I think is really important is just looking at how valuable you might be as an organization to a given vendor. I think a lot of times companies are disappointed when they go, they implement SAP or Oracle or Microsoft, and they find out that they're just one of millions of customers and they're a small fish in a big pond, and they don't get the attention they need during an implementation or post implementation for support and that sort of thing. Whereas, sometimes for smaller, kind of second tier, and I don't mean second tier as in terms of inferior, I mean second tier as far as not one of the big three incumbents, company like Epicor and others in the market. A lot of times you're going to get more attention and you're going to get more resources, and it's easier. We've seen, for example, with you guys at Epicor, it's easier to escalate things within the organization than it might be at an SAP or certainly a Microsoft too, or anyone along those lines. So that's something to think about too. If you're a big, massive corporation, sure, you're going to get the attention of SAP and Oracle. But if you're not, you have to look at that too. How are they going to partner with me, and how will my vendor give me the support I need, going forward?
Yeah, I had a different vendor than the first two I've already talked about, but I had two customer down situations, and the response was, "Well, we're going to wait until our answer is perfect." And my point to professional services is, do you understand the angst you're causing this customer by going dark for
Mhm.
6 to 8 weeks? I mean, they have got to report to their management. We need to communicate and convey. And, it's not uncommon for us to have, weekly, sometimes bi-weekly status calls to make sure that we're all getting to where we want to, because at the end of the day, that's where the relationship is. And a good, strong relationship, knowing, empowers you guys on the ground to be able to report to your superiors about what's going on, so you look good. But also you have that confidence that it's moving forward. I often say silence is suspicious, right? And seriously, you got a problem and you're not hearing much. Are you feeling good? No.
Right, right. Yeah, great advice, and that's sort of a great way to leave it, and a good takeaway for the audience here today. Couple things. Obviously, again, download the top 10 ERP systems if you want to learn more about Epicor and other systems in the marketplace and how they compare to one another. That's an objective ranking of the top 10 systems for 2024. It was just released today, so if you scan the QR code there, you're going to be one of the first people to read it. In fact, I've read the raw edit, the work in progress, but I haven't even seen the final version yet. So you'll see it before I do. I'm familiar with what's in it, but you'll get to see the final polished version before even I do. Another thing that I'll remind you of, my book, The Final Countdown, is available now on Amazon. Go to Amazon, you can get the electronic copy. Don't worry, that watermark will not be on your copy. That's just because this is an advanced copy that's not for sale. Be sure to check it out. It's technology agnostic, provides best practices for defining a digital strategy for your transformation going forward. So be sure to check that out. If you aren't able to scan this QR code, or if I take it away too soon, you can rewind the video and watch it again, or just go to thefinalcountdown.com and you can find a link to buy the book there. And in fact, if you buy it before it goes on sale this coming Saturday, you can get it for half price, which is $4.99, and then the full price will be $9.99 once the book is officially released and available on Saturday of this week. So be sure to check that out, and I hope you enjoyed the book. It's a technology agnostic book, as is the top 10 ranking that you can scan on the QR code at the top of the screen. So anyway, with all that being said, thank you, Kristin. This was a great conversation. Time flies when you and I are chatting, and it was a great conversation. There's a lot we didn't cover. We could have spent another hour or two and still not covered everything we wanted to, but I really appreciate you being here today.
Really, thank you for the opportunity. Congratulations on your book, and I can't wait to spend my $4.99. I'm going to order that today. I'm super excited. Congratulations on Final Countdown.
Absolutely. Thank you. And if, go ahead and buy it today. I'll bring you, next time I see you, Kristin, I'll bring you an autographed copy. How about that? I'll bring you a hard copy as well. So, and for some select audience members too, if you want a signed copy, let me know, and I'd be happy to do that. So, anyway, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kristin. It's great having you for your first time on the podcast. You did great. So thank you for being here, and great topic. And thank you to the audience for the great questions too. You can find this recording will get edited and polished and added with new content, and it'll come out as a full episode of Transformation Ground Control a week from tomorrow. So be sure to check that out. And we do this live recording of the main podcast interview every Tuesday. So join us on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Same time, same place for that. So thank you all. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Have a great week in the meantime. Take care.
Thank you.